Hello, students. My name is JC Binoy. I hope you all are doing well and are taking care of yourselves and of your families. Do stay home and stay safe. Do maintain regular hygiene, all right, because COVID 19 is not yet behind us. So take care of yourselves and also please take up the revisions seriously and do your notes and assignments regularly. There are many students who are still not submitting their notes and assignments as well as their attendance. So that means many of you all are still not watching the videos that we're sending you. So please make it a point to do it. All right. Now, today we are going to revise something. All right. Now, what is that thing? Can you see this logo? Does this remind you, this picture remind you of anything? It should remind you of the United Nations. Okay, so we are going to revise the lesson number 15 from our SST textbook for grade 5, United Nations, chapter 15. Okay, now what we're going to revise today is about United Nations and the purpose of United Nations. Okay, now how did the United Nations come into existence? What happens when we fight with our friends? We go, or with our family, with our siblings. If we are in school, we go and complain to our parents, correct? Sorry, yeah, if we are at home, we go and complain to our parents. If we are at school, we go and complain to our teachers or beyond. Okay, but what happens when there is a fight between countries? Okay, what happens when there is an argument between countries? What happens then? Okay, so one such situation that rose, now there have been fights in the different parts of the world, and there have been different wars, but what was so major about the First World War? This is an image from First World War. You have to remember that the First World War was fought in 1914, from 1914 onwards to 1918. I have put up the dates on the screen. Please have a look at it. Okay, and what happened during the First World War is that many countries were fighting against, they had taken sides and they were fighting against each other, and it went on, and many people died, millions of people died. Okay, and there was a lot of destruction. Many countries lost their lost their source of income. Many countries were left devastated. Many people lost their lives and lost their homes, lost their livelihoods. So the First World War left the world in a very bad manner, in a bad condition. So then many of the leaders after the World War thought that this was not a good thing, what had happened, and they thought that we should avoid such a situation from happening again. Okay, so after the First World War in 1918, a few people from different countries came together, few leaders came together, and they formed the League of Nations. What did they form? The League of Nations. League means group. Okay, so they formed a group of nations. Now, what was this group of nations supposed to do? It was supposed to take care of these conflicts that happen between countries. They wanted to, their purpose of the purpose of the League of Nations was to solve conflicts or arguments or fights between countries. Okay, but it failed. How do we know that it failed? It failed because the Second World War happened, and the Second World War was ruthless. It was very bad. It was even worse than the First World War, and the destruction was even worse. So many people lost, many people were killed. The Nazis were trying to eliminate races depending on their religion, depending on their color, depending on their genes. So they just went on and on killing people from different countries, and they went on trying to conquer different countries. So Second World War was even more devastating than the First World War. And Second World War started from 1939 and went on till 1945. So please remember the dates. The First World War happened between 1914 and 1918, and the Second World War happened between 1939 and 1945. Now this Second World War was longer, took place for a longer time. It killed more people, it involved more countries, and it was just not ending. Finally, America joined the war. America also joined the war, but what they did was that they dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which are places in Japan. Okay, so the nuclear bombs were thrown on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. Now, these were nuclear bombs, and nuclear bombs are very dangerous. They cause a lot of radiation, and because of radiation, the people not only die of that area, but that area which gets exposed to radiation, nuclear radiation, gets devastated. It is not safe for humans to stay there till the radiation doesn't go away and or doesn't finish, or and even the plant life and animal life are affected very badly, and this effect can go on for generations, because the infected people can pass it on to the next generation genes also. So it was really bad, and to avoid such a scenario again, or such an incident again, it was decided after the First World War that the United Nations that countries would come together, and instead of having a war, they would try to resolve their issues by discussion. Okay, and for this they created the United Nations. Okay, so United Nations was created to or formed to determine, it was with the main purpose was to prevent any future wars, because one more war that could lead to such destruction or use of nuclear weapons could be very devastating for earth, for our life on earth. Okay, so to avoid such a thing, United Nations was formed. It was replaced by it was in the in place of League of Nations. So instead of League of Nations, it got replaced by United Nations. Okay, now United Nations has a lot of activities that it does, and they have 193 member countries now. Okay, United Nations was formed on 24th October 1945. Okay, when was United Nations formed? It was formed on 24th October 1945. And what are the goals of the United Nations? The goals of the United Nations are mentioned or written in a document. Now, this document is known as the Charter of United Nations. What is it known as? It is known as the Charter of United Nations. Please look at the screen and understand it. Okay, when was the United Nations formed? It was formed on 24th October 1945. Why was it formed? It was formed to prevent wars. Okay, it was formed to prevent wars. Second, what is the goal of the United Nations? These goals are written in a document called the Charter of United Nations. What is a charter? It is just document in which the initial ideas or the purpose of the organization are written. Okay, why it is formed, who are the members. So all these things can be mentioned in the charter of any organization. So this is the goals of the United Nations are mentioned in the Charter of the United Nations. How many countries came together to form the United Nations after the after the Second World War? There were 51 countries. Okay, so those countries are called as the original or founding members. Okay, so how many founding members were there? 51. Okay, so initially, as soon as the Second World War got over, there were 51 countries who came together to form the United Nations, and India was one of those countries. Now, what is the goal of the United Nations? It is to maintain peace and security among all the countries in the world. It is to encourage development in the world, but to protect the environment also. So, where the economy is developing, but the environment is also protected. So, this is called sustainable development, and this is one of the functions of the United Nations. Another important fact was the human rights, to protect human rights, because when countries become very powerful, or when a particular group of people become very powerful, they try to press down oppress other people of other communities, of other countries, of other regions. It could be anything. So to protect human rights was one of the major goals of United Nations. And humanitarian assistance, so it is the job United Nations chooses to take care of giving aid, giving help to countries that need it. Okay, so that is humanitarian assistance in terms of when there's a flood, when there is now COVID-19. So in many countries there are a lot of money issues, there are a lot of issues of no lack of hospitals and things like that. So United Nations goes and provides this help. They provide doctors, They bring funding, they give money, they bring medicines, so all these things, food for the children, these are different things that the United Nations does. Now, what is the purpose of the United Nations? Let's look at it. One, it is to maintain international peace and security. Peace and security in all the countries all over the world, so that there is not a world war again. Okay. Next is to take efforts to stop wars from happening, and if they see that there are countries which are fighting too much, then they try to reduce. They try to talk to those people and to stop the fights. Okay, so it is to prevent and remove threats to peace of the world, and they try to build friendly relations with countries by encouraging economic development, or by encouraging trade among countries. So these are different things that the United Nations does, and this is the purpose of the United Nations. Okay, so these are the purposes of the United Nations, and they try to see that these moral values are implemented in all the societies of the country, and even the basic human rights and basic education, food, shelter, these things should be available to the people. So for these things, the United Nations runs campaigns. Okay, this is the headquarter of United Nations in Geneva. Okay, so this is a regional headquarter, and these are different things about the United Nations which we need to take care. So like I said, it takes care of different relations between the countries. Also, it solves the problems related to economics of the country, the economy of a country. If there's a country which is not very developed, okay, so then United Nations creates projects so that they can help in development of that area in that country or society. They try to preserve heritage sites in the all across the world. So you have different heritage sites which are protected by the United Nations. They give them funding so that the country takes care of those monuments, so that that heritage is safe and preserved for the coming generations, for the future generations. And it runs many campaigns or programs to create awareness, to improve human rights, and to encourage human rights and fundamental freedom for all people. All people have the right to freedom, irrespective of their religion, caste, creed, anything. So this is a purpose which the United Nations works on, and it encourages countries to improve on these aspects of their country. And it is to create a harmony among all the actions of the countries of the world. So it tries to bring together the countries, and if there is a conflict or if there is an argument between countries, then United Nations tries to bring peace, tries to bring them together, tries to make them talk it out. Okay, so these are different things that the United Nations does. Now, what are the principles of the United Nations? The major principle is that if you are a member of United Nations, the country is supposed to see that instead of creating a war or having a war amongst each other, they will talk out the discussion, or they will discuss the topic, and they will try to resolve the issue peacefully. They will not endanger peace of the world. They will not harm the peace of the world. The nations will not use force or weapons or armies against countries to force them to listen to them. Okay, and they will maintain international peace. Now, how does the United Nations function? United Nations has 6 organs. Okay, it has 6 different main organs, and it works through it. And the headquarters of the United Nations, the headquarters is in New York City, which is in USA. Okay, so where is the headquarters of the United Nations? It is in New York City, USA. How many organs does the United Nations have? 6. The United Nations has 6 organs, and the regional headquarters of United Nations are in Geneva, Vienna, and Nairobi. Okay, regional headquarters, because the world is such a huge world and they have different languages, so it is not feasible to have only one headquarter. So then that is why United Nations has different headquarters in different regions. And where are they? So they have one in Geneva, one in Vienna, and one in Nairobi. So these are the 3 regional headquarters. So how many regional headquarters does the United Nations have? 3. Where are they? They are in Geneva, Vienna, and Nairobi. And today we are going to stop here. Please revise these points again thoroughly so that you should be able to answer any of these questions. When was the First World War? When did the First World War happen? When did the Second World War happen? Why was the League of Nations created? Why was the United Nations formed? How many founding members were there in the United Nations? Where is the headquarter of the United Nations? How many organs does it have? Where are the regional headquarters of United Nations? These are questions which you should know. What is the purpose of the United Nations? What is the main goal of the United Nations? So these are different things that you need to remember and learn. So please learn and revise thoroughly. Okay, hope you have a nice day. Thank you.